In the small town of Millfield, there was a family who had an old electric fan named Breezy in their living room. Breezy had been around for many years, and it had seen many hot summers, but this summer was different. Breezy had heard the family talking about getting a new air conditioning unit, and it knew that if it didn't keep the room cool by all means, it would be thrown out. Breezy had always been a hard worker, but it had never had to work this hard before. It spun its blades as fast as it could, blowing cool air throughout the room. It never stopped, not even for a moment. It didn't want the family to think that it wasn't doing its best. Despite all its efforts, the family seemed to take Breezy for granted. They went about their days, not realizing the hard work Breezy was putting in to keep them cool. Breezy began to feel unappreciated and invisible. One day, the family had some guests over, and they complained that the living room was too hot. Breezy didn't understand how this could be. It had been working so hard to keep the room cool. The guests suggested that maybe Breezy wasn't powerful enough and that the family should get a new one. Breezy felt a sense of dread wash over it. It knew that if the family thought it wasn't doing its job properly, it would be replaced. Breezy didn't want to be replaced. It had been in the family for so long, and it felt like a part of it. Breezy had always taken pride in its work, and it couldn't bear the thought of being tossed aside like it didn't matter. Determined to prove itself, Breezy spun its blades as fast as it could. It blew the cool air with all its might, trying to impress the family and their guests. It was hot, tired, and on the verge of breaking down, but it refused to stop. It knew that this was its chance to show the family that it was more than just an old electric fan. The guests began to feel the cool air, and they complimented the family on their new air conditioning unit. The family smiled and thanked them, but Breezy knew the truth. It had worked so hard to keep the room cool, and it had done it all on its own. Days turned into weeks, and Breezy continued to spin its blades, but this time it felt different. It had realized that it didn't need the recognition of others to feel proud of itself. It had always taken pride in its work, and that was enough. The family eventually did get a new air conditioning unit, and Breezy was moved to the basement, but it didn't feel sad or defeated. It knew that it had done its best, and that was all that mattered. As Breezy sat in the basement, it thought about all the hard work it had done throughout its life. It had always been a hard worker, but it had never realized how much it meant to the family. Breezy smiled to itself, knowing that it had taken pride in its work and that it had made a difference in the lives of the people around it. Breezy had learned an important lesson. It realized that sometimes recognition and appreciation may not come from others, but that doesn't mean the work you do isn't valuable or important. Breezy knew that it had to take pride in its work, even if no one else noticed. Years went by, and Breezy remained in the basement, never to be used again. But it didn't matter to Breezy anymore. It had learned to take pride in its work, and that was all that mattered. One day, the family's youngest child was playing in the basement and stumbled upon Breezy. The child was fascinated by the old fan and asked their parents why they had never seen it before. The parents explained that it was an old electric fan that they used to use before they got their air conditioning unit. The child was amazed by Breezy's hard work and asked if they could keep it in their room. The parents agreed, and Breezy was dusted off and plugged in once again. As Breezy spun its blades, the child felt the cool air and smiled. They thanked Breezy for keeping them cool, and Breezy realized that it had made a difference once again. From that day on, Breezy was no longer invisible. The child would talk to Breezy, telling it about their day and thanking it for keeping them cool. Breezy would spin its blades, feeling a sense of pride in its work. It didn't matter that the family never noticed its hard work. Breezy knew that it had made a difference in someone's life, and that was all that mattered. As Breezy continued to keep the child cool, it thought about the lesson it had learned. It had learned that taking pride in your work is important, and that even the smallest things can make a difference in someone's life. Breezy smiled to itself, feeling grateful for the chance to make a difference once again. In the end, Breezy knew that it was more than just an old electric fan. It was a hard worker who took pride in its work, and it had made a difference in the lives of those around it. And as the years passed, Breezy continued to spin its blades, feeling proud of the work it had done and the difference it had made in the world.